Good afternoon. My name is Annerieke Douma. I'm director from for the city's business unit at Circular Economy and responsible for our global alliances. I would firstly like to thank the Taipei City Government, Mayor, and the organization of the Sustainable Future Cities Summit. Before I dive a little bit more into what cities can do and how we can work towards a more sustainable future for our planet and for society as a whole, I'd like to go a little bit more abstract and look at our global materials traction, which has fueled economic growth since the Industrial Revolution. But it's increasingly challenging because we're facing the natural limits of our global ecosystem. And while in January, just before the pandemic hit us, or while the pandemic was starting to hit us, we see that by now, the current pandemic has shown a temporary improvement, which is showcasing the fundamentals of the linear risk. It's still in place and it is proven by now. We are Circular Economy and we have a mission to empower a global community of businesses, cities, and nations to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. We do this through scalable and practical insights and solutions to address humanity's greatest challenge. I would love to talk you a little bit through the different levels that we work at. At the moment, more and more countries are actually recognizing the circular economy as a means to make their economies more competitive, more resilient, and improve the living conditions for its inhabitants. We need to meet our emission targets and avoid deforestation, for example, but how countries reach an ecologically safe and socially just development space for the people varies greatly. The Circularity Gap Report for countries provides insight into the best interventions to boost circularity on a national level and the tools to monitor progress. For example, the country of Norway, we just launched a report a few days ago, is 2.4% circular, while the Netherlands is 24.5% circular. The proposed strategies in the report outline the opportunities toward, let's say, a 75% plus circular country. These countries can track progress through this metric. There is a link, and I'm happy to share with you the presentation after. We also focus on some thematic areas, which is jobs and skills, because we definitely don't want to leave anyone behind in the transition. We focus on textiles, we focus on businesses, and we focus on finance. But this summit is mainly focusing at sustainable cities, and it's one of our core programs, to be honest. And we looked ourselves into what this current situation of COVID is actually truly teaching us. So we have actually extracted 5 key lessons ourselves, which I would love to share with you before we get to what it really means to work on the ground with cities. It has exposed to our mind the inequality in our society and the deep flaws in our economy, which fail people from deprived communities more than anyone else. And as Mayor Sadiq Khan of London said before, we need to come out of this embracing a new normal and with a renewed drive to address the climate emergency. Our first lesson that we have extracted is reframe the urban commons. One of the tragic realities, basically, of the pandemic is that those with the least are also the ones who are worst affected. Whether it's providing safe houses, sanitation, access to green space, or sufficient nutritious food, COVID-19 has actually underscored the importance of ensuring that the basic needs of all residents are met. To deal with the immediate impacts of the pandemic, cities may have embraced a solution. And to protect vulnerable, unsheltered residents, some cities have opened, basically, vacant hotel rooms, enabled through innovations in the sharing economy and circular products as a service business models. Cities are beginning to recognize the potential to provide needs through these shared resources. A second lesson that we see very clearly is to co-create a just and inclusive future. I touched upon this just before, and it's very dear to my heart. The rapid shift towards a new post-pandemic reality has touched the lives of everyone, drastically to a different degree. While many service jobs, basically, service sector jobs have been cut, some of the other jobs are still there and can just be relocated to a home setting, if you have a home, to ensure that there is not a similar divide between those that own the things and those that do not, those that can afford and those that cannot. Innovations in circular models need to be partners with innovations in governance. They need to be socially just, and they need to be inclusive. A third lesson is to embed a local and resilient economy. With the retraction, basically, of global supply chains as a result of COVID, cities throughout the world have been battling to provide sufficient resources for their residents, from personal protective equipment to food. It displays economic vulnerability, and with the 21st century threat of actually climate-induced crises, resilience must be at the core of how we design our cities. Encouragingly, circular principles can support cities in their resilient redesign. A fourth lesson is to reinforce a local and a global identity. While moves towards a more decentralized and localized means of production can help cities build back more resiliently and less carbon intensively, their global mindset should not withdraw, because the pandemic has also shown our dependency of one another in this world, and our dependency through and the connection through the multiple systems. So cities have to take that, what we call a global mentality, when they redesign their cities and in the way we produce and in the way we consume. A fifth element and lesson learned is that we need to redefine the goal. Above all, I think COVID-19 has served the question of whether the goal of our cities is to still focus on GDP growth as a metric for success. Because we can say at this moment, it's not necessarily a reliable indicator of human well-being. So what is next? As cities begin to gradually ease out of the restrictions and confront the realities of the post-COVID-19 future recovery, urban change makers and city leaders, they must take proactive steps to turn ambitions of equitable carbon neutral cities into reality. I think under a new and collective goal, a thriving future, cities can make the necessary strides to redesign their cities and prioritize systems of resilience, inclusivity, embracing new circular economy models. And we at Circular Economy have our program centered around this. And we actually focus on 4 elements in that program: scan, implementation, measuring, and scaling it. So our cities program guides cities on their journey, and we have had the honor to guide already over 25 cities worldwide. And we focus on 3 types of scans. It's a process of a year that we take cities through underground, because the why is understood, but the how isn't. Cities ask questions: where do we start? How do we start? And the first type of scan we have is the Circle City Scan. It's based on a multi-stakeholder strategy development process. It brings all the stakeholders together, and we guide them through a funneling exercise towards implementation of circular strategies with a fact base of a material flow analysis. I'll get to that in a minute. The other one is the Circle Scan tool. It's a light version of what I've just explained in brief. And it's actually supported by a digital tool. And it's so interesting because it allows us to train local organizations to take their cities through a process. And the third one is actually extending a little bit more the way we work in the SCAN process, with the thriving element bringing the donut model into the equation. I'll get to that in a minute when I talk you through the Amsterdam process. So the city scan, the first type, is focused, the funneling exercise is actually focused on 4 phases. The first one, we provide a socio-economic analysis that basically gets the local stakeholder consortium to a decision moment, which sectors to focus on. Where's the biggest employment? What sets the city apart? Milan is known for its fashion industry, for example. Then we provide a material flow analysis, basically looking at the magnitude and the nature of the material flows in these key sectors in order to identify the areas where the biggest environmental impact is and define where the economic and social potential for transformation lies. Then again, the local stakeholder consortium decides which ones to focus on and which circular strategies to prioritize. And then we co-develop action plans with the local stakeholder coalition. This is, in short, what we've also done with the City of Amsterdam. There are some examples. We have Glasgow, we have Prague, but I'll dive deeper into the City of Amsterdam a bit later. The second type of scan, which I spoke to you about, is the Circle City Scan tool. There is a link here, so you can explore yourself how it works. It's a guided innovation process. And we do this together with our partners, Anna MacArthur Foundation, Metabolic Geofluxes, eClay as a core city network organization, and Metabolism of Cities. I'll now get to the journey of Amsterdam. So we started working together 5 years ago. And with a city scan. So the outcome was basically that the city wanted to focus on 3 sectors: food, organic waste streams, the built environment, infrastructure, and third, consumption, goods. This actually has resulted at the same time, the Dutch government issued the ambition to be 100% circular by 2050. We don't know exactly what it means or how we will get there, but it actually did bring a lot of energy into this and to making this ambition happen. The City of Amsterdam has been very progressive and very active and is championing the circular economy in city space a lot. At the moment, there are more than hundreds of pilot projects ahead. A lot of circular economy policy is in place. And at the same time, we actually brought in the donut economic model. And I'll get to that in a little bit more in detail so you understand how the next phase of the journey went. So last year we embarked on a journey within the city about the necessity to make the circular transition benefit all and not just those who can afford it, and to look at the impacts that the city has beyond its boundaries through its consumption of products too. And this is what the donut model so beautifully brings together. It brings social and environmental themes together to create a circular society and a circular city within a safe and just space for humanity. Just a little sidestep on the donut. The diagram, as you see, consists of 2 rings. The inner ring of the donut represents the minimum standards of living, as they're also described in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This entails the basic essentials everyone needs to thrive, from food and clean water, gender equality, democracy, and adequate housing. According to the model, no one should fall short in the whole, in the center of the donut. The outer ring of the donut represents the Earth's environmental limits, from biodiversity loss and air pollution to climate breakdown. Within these boundaries, Between the social foundation and between the outer ring, the ecological ceiling, there is a donut-shaped space. And this is a safe and just space for humanity. It's a space for a regenerative and a distributive economy. So after having seen and studied this donut economic model, it's written by Kate Raworth, and we actually contacted her and talked with the city of Amsterdam to Kate Raworth to see if we could downscale the donut for cities. In short, this has led to a whole program where other US cities have joined us as well, with the C40 network and with Donut Economics Action Lab, the organization of Kate Raworth. And these pioneering cities started to ask themselves, how can our city be a home to thriving people in this thriving place while respecting the well-being of all and health of the whole planet? This means that we looked at 4 lenses. 1, the social local. What would it mean for the people in this city to thrive? It's a participatory process. Secondly, local ecological. What would it mean for this city to thrive within its natural habitat? Global ecological. What is this city's impact on the planet as a whole? What if I buy my phone here? What does that do to the working conditions of people in Congo, for example, or children even? And the global social. What's this city's impact on the well-being of people worldwide? I'm sorry, I gave the example of this quadrant. And then the city works with a lot of local stakeholders to work the portrait into a city selfie. So the city portrait includes qualitative and quantitative information, city targets, city statistics, and is not meant to be a report, but it's a tool. It's a starting point, and it should be used by city stakeholders, civil society organizations, local governments, policy experts, but also businesses, and businesses are critical here. So the power is to turn this into a selfie, where the city starts owning and puts in the projects, the policies, initiatives that already exist. In the city of Amsterdam, I'll just briefly show you how we did this. We involved city stakeholders, for example, on a strategy about housing. How can a strategy about housing having a positive impact on health, on education, climate, air pollution, or even gender equality? Involving city stakeholders. Again, we increased at a later stage and validated the circular strategies with the businesses and the city stakeholders for them to own it. And because otherwise we feel implementation will be very hard to happen. So what was the outcome of the journey? Just before summertime, the city of Amsterdam has released its 2020, its circular strategy 2020-2025. And I will give you maybe 2 examples of what that looks like. On food and biomass, the city of Amsterdam promotes short food chains. I included another few examples of how that would look like in terms of strategy. I can share with you the presentation so you can go through it in detail, and on the right-hand side you'll see what the impacts are on some of the themes of the donut. And you see the impact on climate change, the impact on food, the impact on biodiversity loss. On consumer goods, the second value chain Amsterdam is focusing on, the city has put ambitious ambitions and targets in place to reduce its consumption of goods by 20%. The city itself wants to set the right example by reducing its own consumption, but also implementing 100% circular procurement and adopting policies of access over ownership. In the construction value chain, the city aims to get to a circular and socially responsible criteria for construction. This translates well into circular tender and procurement criteria at all stages of the construction. Using existing buildings before constructing new ones, stimulating circular retrofitting, and apply to housing of all incomes. Again, it has effects on both income and work, on climate change, on housing, and multiple other areas. What we've seen that after the release of the circular strategy, we saw a lot of media who picked this up, and amongst those, The Guardian, who actually put it in the context of the post-corona economy, which is beautifully written. This is how the journey of Amsterdam has been developed. This is how we aim, in a nutshell, to get to a prosperous world for all and an inclusive world. And I'm very, very happy to provide more insights, more information, should you wish, at a later stage. Thank you very, very much.